I think there's a large audience for information told differently. I think that there's a massive part of the audience that is underserved because of the way we provide information.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Just let go. All right, everyone, I've got an announcement. As of today, we are officially enrolling for the 2021 Renegade Accelerator Program, formerly called the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. Okay, so who is this program for? What is it? The Renegade Accelerator is for driven female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs ready to massively increase their impact and income. The program is for like-minded, like-hearted women all over the globe. The experience is intimate, live, real-time, virtual, and it's led by me. Our curriculum is equal parts education, practical education, collaboration, and accountability. In the accelerator, you'll learn directly from me, and I share everything I've learned over the past 20 years in business. We meet in real time to learn, discuss, and grow together. This is high touch. I'll teach you a variety of things, from personal branding to the business side of public speaking, podcasting, publishing, marketing partnerships, how to productize your intellectual property, and we even talk about investing. I teach you all about the different types of investing in order to build your personal wealth. You will also learn the Renegade mentality, which is a key ingredient in your success to generate real results. This program is the career love of my life because I get to curate a mosaic of driven, like-minded, like-hearted women who come together to lift each other and themselves up to the next level. After the Renegade Accelerator, you become a member of my top-level alumni community. This group of unmatched women who are making a positive impact is personally curated by me. The relationship building and networking opportunities are endless, and this collective of real, valuable connections will be something that you have forever. If you're at the point where you are ready to take action and accelerate, head to renegadeaccelerator.com. You can sign up for more information where I will guide you in determining if the program and the timing is right for you. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Why not now? Head to renegadeaccelerator.com. We have Jessica Yellin on the show today. Okay, so this is the former chief White House correspondent from CNN, who is very decorated in all of her accomplishments, top of Harvard to be one of them. But then she left and she basically started her own news platform from scratch by herself in her backyard. This just gets me so darn excited when it comes to talking about how we can democratize our opportunities and space and industries. Jessica is a walking, talking case study for this. Regardless of politics, we don't even get into politics hardly at all in this conversation. We're talking about how she did this, how she was able to go out on her own and do something that historically has required major funding and time and resources and a big, huge team. Yet she did this by herself in her backyard. That's how she started. Jessica shares why this was important to her, what she's doing differently. And so much of this whole conversation is about innovation. And innovation does not necessarily mean that you need access to a lot of money or a lot of people. It means that you have to be willing to do something you've never done and go somewhere you've never gone. And in order to do that, you have to be able to get over the hurdles in your mind, right? Those mental hurdles. Jessica has been on the world stage, national, global television, yet she was very scared to actually turn her phone around and shoot her first video at home by herself. This conversation is wide-ranging. We talk about the role of the ego, especially when we're doing something we've never done before. We talk about self-identity. We talk about creating things instead of trying to convince others of what we want to create. Instead, just get started. Jessica's news entity is called News Not Noise. So you can head to newsnotnoise.com to check that out. Her goal is to share information, to give you information, not a panic attack. And she does this through social media. Jessica's also the author of a book titled Savage News, which actually is a fiction novel that is lightly or loosely based on real events that have happened in the media industry. With the kind of reinvention of how a news platform is created and operates, it also means she's had to reimagine what the economic model looks like. And so we talk through that, and we talk about how her audience is actually serving and supporting her work, which is very different and unique compared to a traditional system. Without further ado, here is Renegade, Jessica Yellin. Being able to design my own day and do it in the most efficient way is a non-negotiable for me. I'm a bit of a time management nerd, so when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and effective to get the most out of my day, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and it's called Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized professionally and personally. And my to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. We are in lockstep. Monday.com is like having a brand new operating system. Everything has its own home, deadline. You can see the team members associated with the tasks, and it's color coordinated, so you can easily navigate your own task list. We all have multifaceted jobs, businesses, and lives. With Monday, you're able to keep all of these components organized in their own compartments, but you're also one click away from seeing the big picture and how they all integrate together. Creating systems and procedures within your day and business saves a lot of time. For example, my team and I have a dedicated Monday.com board for this very podcast. Did you know that there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast ready for air? It's the same exact process every single time. And it's a system that we have put into place. So we know the various key steps are assigned to certain people, and we've mapped out the entire process from start to finish within this one board. This allows us to be streamlined. It cuts back on the amount of emails exchanged as well as the amount of meetings needed. One feature I love is that my social media content calendar is built inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, I like, and it's embedded into my overall calendar as well. Another feature we use every single day is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer, which is extremely distracting and inefficient. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin to start your free trial today. That's hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin. Jessica, welcome to the Why Not Now show. In the spirit of why not now, let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, and really understand how you navigated from idea to action.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. The big moment for me was the day I decided to record my first IG video, which was incredibly long in coming. It took about a year and a half of encouragement from my friends and discussion and running into dead ends. And there was one day where somebody was sitting with me at my house and was like, you have to do this now. Like literally, she's like, you got to do this now. And because we'd been talking about it. And then I was like, I can't do it alone. And she's like, okay, I'll find a day to come over. And then she's over and she's like, this is happening. And then it was one of those like where time goes into slow motion.
Yes.
And I remember everything. And I remember feeling like such a fraud and crazy person. And what am I doing? And this is insane. And it like primed for humiliation and all of those things. And uncertainty. And then I was just like, I don't know, there's this person across the table staring at me who gave up her day. I have to do this. And so I did.
You did it. And so, I mean, this is kind of fascinating because so many people would think you're at the top of your game. You know, you've done all these things and then here it comes time to record an IG video. And you've been like hologrammed into Wolf's studio and like all of these stages you've already been on. But I love this so much because it goes to show, and I've been fortunate to work with a lot of big, huge innovators. Everybody gets that, whether you call it imposter syndrome or limiting beliefs, like it doesn't discriminate, right?
Absolutely not. And for me, it was because I had done all those things. I was used to being on television with a camera person and a producer and a team around me and somebody in the studio. And I had navigated that world for years and I knew the rules of what to do and what not to do. And I understood who I was speaking to and why. And this was like, after being at the White House as the chief White House correspondent, I'm now in my backyard alone talking to my phone. Like, so part of it was like, how far has one fallen? And also, who am I talking to? What is this supposed to be? Like, what's the voice? There's a big part of like, how am I supposed to show up? Who am I supposed to show up as right now? Because I was still like cookie cutter news girl. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't evolved into just being more me. And I didn't know how to do that. And also it was like, I'm going to talk to my phone. I mean, I can tell you the actual video is a comedy, but it was definitely a jumping off the high dive experience. And I'll tell you one thing, somebody who's like a top of the industry person has started to do videos and said to me, I'm in a cold sweat. I can't do them. How did you get through it at the beginning? And I was like, well, I did the first one and then I didn't die. And I knew I'm not going to die. So I can
batting
do another
1,000
one.
at staying alive. Like, I got this. Okay, this is amazing. So it sounds like I can only imagine. So here's your ego saying like, whoa, White House to backyard. What's going on? Innovation is happening. I mean, I have so much I thank you for what you've done because you're paving a way and a showing. Seeing is believing. You're showing what's possible. with not only social communication, but also with that willingness to get uncomfortable and start paving that on your own path, regardless of industry. So that innovation is like fully going to, and your self-identity, I can imagine. But let's talk about your friend, because it's fairly common that there's someone that's just going to kind of push us out there and be like it or not, I'm holding you accountable type thing, because you got started. And that was that delta we talk about. So that was the biggest baby step you could ever make, right?
Just doing it was. And I really, you're right, it was my friends. I started getting calls like a year before. I had this whole idea that the news industry should be disrupted. Everybody's getting it on social. I have all these theories about how news should be done differently. We can talk about. And I couldn't find the path in. Like, I was too far ahead to explain to just, media investors what I was talking about. I'm like, you don't understand. It's a different voice. It's a different thing. I couldn't communicate it. And my friends were like, you just need to create it. You can't convince people who don't know the world what the world needs. And they're like, I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And just one person, they're like, put your face on camera and start talking to your phone. And I would say to them, what am I going to say? And one of my friends said to me, you literally just explained to me what's going to happen in Congress next month. And pick up your phone and say that. I'm like, nobody wants to hear that. She's like, I wanted to hear that. Just talk. Like, you understand how things work. Explain how things work the way you tell us. And so what happened was a bunch of people started saying it, and I ignored all of them until I realized I was hearing the same messages, and it wasn't from my closest friends. It was from people I knew at a bit of a distance, which was interesting to me. And then they showed up over and over because they kept pressing me to do it.
Okay, so that's also what a good takeaway. Create it, don't convince. Like, just get going on your own, because you can spend a lot of time trying to do that. So that was a huge takeaway. But then I think about, what you've been able to do. So Glennon Doyle, for example, who's been on the show, I saw a clip
She's amazing.
Of you. She's incredible, right? Just like half of the world's spirit animal, I think. Totally, right? Like,
yeah.
So I saw this clip of you and Glennon, and you're explaining to her what's going on, right? It must have been the day after election, or maybe the night of. More news is trickling in. And what's really interesting, and what you just touched on, is your ability to explain what can often be really complicated into just normal terms that are understandable. And it doesn't seem like it should be that difficult, but it is not being done in very many places at all. So that in itself, is that something that you've always just been able to do, just kind of simplify down, because you have all the depth and knowledge and you could go real high above people's heads. But did you see that as one of the missing ingredients?
Yes. My big frustration is that understanding and empathy weren't a big enough part of what we did. When I came up in the news business, it was about conflict and breaking the thing first. So you got to get the thing first, and that leads you down a path of anything I can get first becomes news, which ends up making news these firebomb moments of little explosions of information that have no context, and they don't matter. But I got it first, so I'm putting it on the front, that happens, front page and the evening news. And then this other thing, which is you get eyeballs through conflict. And conflict means negativity, partisanship, combat, covering information as sports. And I thought those two things, one stripped people of context and understanding, and the other turned off learning and engagement in a certain part of the audience. And there's neuroscience to show that especially women's learning shuts down when it's a negative valence conversation, meaning screaming, partisanship, focus on negativity. So no shocker, women were so many undecided swing voters, because the way we're talking about the news doesn't enhance learning for them. And we're like firebombing you these little bits of information that have no larger context unless you're just following the increments. So my whole thesis was, let's turn it on its head. Let's provide information in context that emphasizes why this matters to you, and then figure out how to bring in the empathy. so that, news is based on this theory that conflict drives eyeballs. I come from LA. Hollywood is based on this theory that empathy drives eyeballs. So obviously empathy can work. You just have to figure out the way in. And I tried explaining this. I would say what I do is I give you information, not a panic attack. Or
love that.
The news competes for your anxiety. Like I would be told, make this more intense, add urgency, make me feel panicked. It's not accidental that you feel so anxious after watching the news. And I wanted to reverse engineer that. And believe me, I went in rooms talking about this and people look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, let's talk about that then too. You mentioned like media investors and you were out on a mission to convince, and then your friend is like, no, just get started and create. What was that like? Did you think in your mind, I'm going to go raise some money, start a new news network? Like what was the vision? And then what was the reality? Obviously it's nutting out just the way just fine and the way it's meant to. But how did you reconcile those two like visions that you had, especially I'm guessing first time entrepreneur? That's a huge step, especially leaving such sturdy structures with 97 people around you to make sure everything is dialed in. So yeah, talk about those that came to be.
I mean, it still remains, isolating and challenging a lot of times, right? It's that piece of it because it's so new to me. But I found in the early days, I've learned a lot about myself, and that you have to work in the ways that work for you. And that might not match other people's reality or their experience. You just have to trust yours. And so there were a ton of people who were like, you should just go raise money and do this new thing. And you just like sell. And I was like, I want to know what it is before I sell it. Like I want it to exist in the world before I start saying, I needed the seed to blossom a little. Mm-hmm. And I didn't understand that at the beginning. I didn't understand that's how I work. I just was like, okay, everybody says this is the thing to do. I better do it. And I'm a person who's always accomplished what I set out to do. So I'm like, I can just figure this out. But it was too, for me, debilitating to sit in rooms with people who would challenge me on stuff that I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you're not even asking anything close to the right questions. Like you don't even know what you don't know and how this is all wrong. Mm-hmm. And I found it debilitating. And I'm like, I'm so good in that. Maybe I'm just bad at this. And then you realize I'm just not in the right path. Like this needs to take a different path. Mm-hmm. And the best thing I did was going to the audience and saying, will you support this work?
I love it. Let's talk about that too. I mean, with Patreon, is that what you're talking about? Or just your economic model? I mean, you're probably thinking, I'm going to do this on my own. Well, how am I going to generate revenue?
And so Patreon, people told me at first, don't use Patreon or don't. What I was told was, don't go to the audience for money, because if you don't raise enough money off the audience, VCs won't be interested in you. And I'm like, what about just going to the audience to make money off, like to make a business that grows off support from your audience and sponsorships? That's another model. So it took me a while to realize like this whole thing.
Go away.
Yeah. So when I waited way too long to ask the audience. And then I was like, oh, this is going to be thirsty, or this is going to be, and then I did it. And oh my God, people have so shown up. And they show up for Patreon. They show up. I have a donate, like a support button. They show up for that. They want more. So that's what makes it exciting. And now, of course, the other stuff is showing up again. Like other people are interested. And then I have to decide what's the path I want.
Sure. That's going to continue to happen as things
really
grow. Oh yeah. Different doors are going to continue you just will have to decide again. What do you want, right? I mean, where do you want this to go? And it's not an easy decision, especially when you have the phone ringing and, but at the same time, you've proven to yourself already. You've learned how you work, which is, pretty valuable for that first time around.
I mean, what I learned is to listen. People say, listen to your gut. Sometimes you don't know what's your gut and what's fear. Mm-hmm. it's hard to discern sometimes. And so I learned some discernment. I still wonder about, like, I have such a clear vision of what I want, what the world needs in terms of information and communication and media and what's possible. And that's what I want to be able to do. And I'm limited because I'm just one person. So I need more people to, bring in more people and do more.
And that's good that you're saying that, because people already have shown up that they want help, whether it's, your audience wanting to support, or if you do share that, and that's another thing that I think we get mixed signals on. Don't share what your vision is. Don't share what you want. It's like, actually, that's worked out pretty well for me in terms of ROI, because then people show up to help support it. But if they don't know what that is, there's zero chance, that you'll have that. But this is also new too. It's like there is no playbook for this, right? So anyone that shows up that says, hey, this is how it's done, you kind of have this free pass to be like, actually, this is just, the wild, wild west, because you don't have that track record, right? There aren't industry standards for what you're doing per se. So how you make money, how you distribute, how you even change the emotional side of your reporting, and it's all so new, so exciting. So
I love that you find it exciting.
I'm so excited. I just want I wish you could teach this to a bunch of other industries too, but which you can. But sources. So I can imagine you having obviously this whole book of sources and information, and you've got your system and the pre, you going out on your own act. And did that change as you started to create your own platform? Did you find that you weren't able, the way that you were getting information shifted, or was it blocked, or did it open up?
You mean in the actual work of journalism and reporting?
Yes.
Because also what I was doing before was very specific. Like, I was the chief White House correspondent on the White House beat. So I was in constant conversation with all the relevant people in these spaces, but about that incremental stuff, right? About sort of what's the next, the race would have been right, to figure out before it's announced by the transition team, who's going to get that cabinet position? Can you get it 20 minutes early? That kind of thing. Now I remind myself all the time, I don't need to be first. I even get my friends calling me up still saying, Yellin, you should just report this and break some news, because you'll get picked up by the aggregators and you'll get more eyeballs, and you'll get more buzz, and you'll get, you need to be reporting this stuff. And I have to remind myself, you can find that everywhere else. What I'm doing is I make sense of the information for the audience. I bring in thoughtful voices to put it in context. I use my reporting and sources to get a deeper understanding of significance that I then share with the audience. And so for me, a little bit of it is the discipline to break away from what's like reflex, natural reporting instinct. Oh, I can get that scoop. And to remind myself, you don't need to spend your time and energy there. I'm redirecting to what my purpose is. And it's hard because what my purpose is, I think is really important in the world, and it's definitely valued by the audience. I don't think it's prestigious in my professional circle. And so there's a status thing to breaking news. And I have to be comfortable not being in that game, right?
It's ego again, kind of.
It's ego.
Probably, right?
It's ego.
What a personal development opportunity along this entire path too. So when you say your purpose, how would you sum that up? And I'm guessing your core audience, they're actually not as interested in the scoop or the quickest. They want the version that you have. So how would you wrap up? I mean, your goal is to give information, not a panic attack. And is that kind of...
It's bigger than that. My purpose is, I think there's a large audience for information told differently. I think that there's a massive part of the audience that is underserved because of the way we provide information. And what I'm trying to do is shift the presentation to, and in success, engage more people get them to understand what we already understand, because it's not hard to understand politics or COVID science, really, or, what's going on with the economy and Wall Street or the fundamentals of parenting. The way we talk about it is so filled with jargon and insider drama and this sports-like gamesmanship that it alienates people. And so I would go into these rooms of like swing voting women and they'd say, the news comes on and I shut my ears. I go, turn it off, turn it off. And the conventional wisdom in Washington was, they don't like politics. They're not interested in news or information. And if you look at the studies, it shows that women tend to gravitate toward human interest stories and, personal stories in the newspaper and not politics. And my whole thesis was, it's not because they don't care about our issues. It's the way we're talking. And so my larger mission is to talk in a different way, to bring more people into the conversation, engage them, empower them with information so that they can make informed decisions and act, which is the fundamental role of the press in a democracy.
Amazing. And I think about dissonance and resonance and just physiologically how we feel in both situations. This is science, not just emotionally, but I know I feel that way when I turn the television on, regardless of what channel. And so that if you can just resonate with the way something's being told, even if it's not the information, then you're already kind of a little more open to possibly doing a bit of a head tilt. And speaking of head tilt, I was watching a clip of you on Colbert last year, and you were talking about one of just the reality of the environment that you were working in when you had producers and all the people around. And I can imagine there would be a desire to maybe go be your own boss, because you were talking about some of the notes you would get from producers, right? And the length of your hair at one point. So there was a question on if you were tilting your head too much or if you had an uneven haircut, but like an eighth of an inch.
My entire career, I was tortured about my hair. And I have a lot of hair. It's naturally curly. I blow it straight. I did not blow it straight to the satisfaction of management for a very long time. I always think I would have had a much easier path in news if the Brazilian blowout had come out at least 10 years earlier.
Oh my God.
So I've written a novel, and in the novel, there's a whole chapter about the character who's going to get her Brazilian blowout. And I get migraines, and it literally would trigger a migraine for at least a week. But I would still do it every 5 months because you need to have the silky straight hair in order to do the news.
Incredible. Just these tales. I'm so glad you wrote the book, and as fiction too, as a novel, because And I don't know if you know Maureen Sherry, but she did a somewhat similar thing with Opening Bell. She was one of the first women to be the top of her game on Wall Street, and she didn't sign an NDA. She didn't. Yeah, she basically went and wrote a book. But thank you for writing it, because a lot of people listening would probably just be like, "What? What is she talking about?" But it's true, right? Or the building story. Can you tell that one real quick?
My whole thing was I wanted to be White House correspondent. Every opportunity I got in any meeting with management anywhere, I'd say, I want to be White House correspondent. They'd always say to me, Jessica, go cover Martha Stewart. She's going to jail, whatever the thing is, or go cover this football player who shot his driver, scandal. And then finally I got this chance at the White House, and they weren't very happy with me because I had a building problem for a while. And I was like, what's that? And I didn't look impressive in front of buildings.
A building problem.
And the truth is, I'm petite. I'm 5'1", and you can't tell that on air. On air, they reframe things. People were constantly saying to me, "Oh my God, I thought you were 5'11" from TV. You're so short in person." So you couldn't tell, but I think management in their head knew I was petite. And there's you can infer all sorts of things. Like that was a constant drama that happened. Yep. And one of the funny things when I published Savage News was that people often said this is very over the top. Like that whole thing about the hair, that would never happen. And there's all this stuff in the book that would never happen. And you're like, no. This is like documentary reality. Yeah. Not all of it. Some of it is larger than life.
Sure.
But not as much as you'd think. Yeah.
I believe it. Do we have a haircut uneven problem? Or are you tilting your head? Or you've got an eighth of an inch? That's incredible to me. So let's talk about your relationship with time for a moment, because, whether you look at now, which it sounds like it may not be as intense with reporting. However, I'm sure there's got to be a level of it. That being said, what are some of your tips or things you do to try and manage your day, time, productivity in a way that keeps you sane, especially right now?
I mean, I should say I've been insane. So I don't really have great tips. Like the period of time, the last 6 months it's just nonstop. You work from dawn to midnight, and it's at least. And my challenge is I am still doing a lot of reporting, and then I have to oversee content getting up every day, a ton of it, and make sure it's accurate, factual, process reflects what I believe, like communicates to the audience well, respond to the audience, and then do the whole like infrastructure side, business side, it's just too much. So I meditate in the morning. I do certain exercises every single day, like physical exercises that I have a routine, and then I try to eat well, but that's really the extent of my, self-care. What happens is usually it's just bad training. Like I go flat out election year. That's just like, I've been a campaign reporter so long. You're used to having no balance. Then you hit the election, you collapse after, but you then remember, oh my God, I still have to do reporting. And then you find a time to go to a spa. But this year you can't go to a spa because of COVID.
And it's kind of still happening in its own weird way. Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's always the case, but you can usually go around Christmas.
Okay. Gotcha.
Although there is this thing in news where you get breaking news on Christmas, like the underwear bomber happened then. You're always primed for things to explode.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So what's one lesson you find yourself learning over and over, Jessica?
One of the things I say is, how do I make this easier?
I love that question. I've heard Tim Ferriss say, what would this look like if it were easy? And it's amazing how we realize how quickly we can make things complicated. That's a good one. And you mentioned earlier you were learning how the difference between fear and gut, like discerning that difference. And I'm curious of where, one of my lifelong questions is learning when to make things happen versus let them happen. Because usually I'm a foot on the gas and I'll make it happen. I know my ability to get shit done. But sometimes that's just not meant to be, and it's not a good look at all. But so you meditate, you mentioned. What did you net out with in terms of being able to tell the difference between your gut and fear and what's talking?
I find that if it's gut and I care too much, and that's why I have anxiety about it. Like I care, but it's gut. I ultimately find enjoyment in the process of pushing through it. If it's fear and I follow whatever the path is that I think I'm supposed to execute on, I find it's not discomfort. It's like lack of enjoyment.
Gotcha.
I don't find any stimulation. I don't find any interest. I think it's pure resistance. And when I'm learning that when you're experiencing pure resistance, I need to reorient into tackling the same thing in a way that includes some like engagement, where some part of like my intellect or creativity or drive feels stimulated by it. That's what's come down for me. I'm sure some healer would say, no, you're like too productivity oriented. You need to just be with the moment or something. But I don't know.
No, I think that's amazing about data, ourselves giving us that constant data feedback loop of the brilliance is being able to discern, like to understand which is which here. And that it kind of informs the next potential step. But it makes total sense. Like if you're excited, it's something that you actually are lit up about versus I think of dissonance, like just resistance. Or I think a lot about especially with women, driven women who've been very successful. I'm using air quotes. I know you can't see me, but by the, standards of our society. And I know I like a good pendulum swing every once in a while. And I've been on that side of the pendulum where it's hustle, grind, chase, 24/7, big numbers, data, go, 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 like pressing from a place to prove something almost. And then I've had a pendulum swing in the past after exiting my first company to, okay, maybe I need to learn to meditate, do yoga, drink kombucha, allow, surrender. And over on this other side, and what I realize is I'm not good at either. Like neither is good for me. However, I don't want to be watered down to a 5 in the middle of the spectrum. So I think of it as kind of like an up peak where it's like a quantum peak where you take both sides, but you blend them. And then you aren't like just watering down or negating some of that drive, because that's what also makes you so good at what you do. And I think of what you just said kind of an example of that, of being able to reconcile those two.
That's so interesting. The only thing that's helped me, what you're saying, as you say it, I'm thinking, I want to be able to do that. I wish I could do that. How can I do that? The only path that I've learned that's new for me is asking for help. I find that so uncomfortable and something I've not been ever good at, nor have I practiced it until now. Somebody actually told me, like, you need to ask for help more. Like I had to hear somebody say it to me over and over and over. And for me, that made such the difference. Mm-hmm. Like that changed my experience. And I realized it's all the obvious things. It's not weakness. It's like whatever. Sometimes other people's expertise helps you get to a decision, all that.
And it sounds like though you're listening to that, that inner compass more too, to inform decisions based on even where you are now and how you got here. But it's fascinating. And when you look at where you are now with your career and the horizon, how do you invest in yourself? Whether that's just, are there new skills? And I imagine, you've taken two different worlds and kind of collided them in a way that isn't really being done. But how do you continue to grow and invest in yourself?
So I think it's interesting. The thing that I want, that I think I need for growth is I need to find some advisors. So I've decided, and I sound like a millennial or a Gen Z, because whenever I give speeches to Gen Z, they're like, how do I get a mentor? The question is always, how do I make someone be my mentor? And my advice is always offer them something too, because they want to know all the cool things you're up to.
Yeah.
Make it a relationship, right? So I realized that in the act of constantly being the one who's giving out wisdom, I've neglected to find sources of wisdom myself. And I used to have that in my dad, but he died.
Like a guide. I mean, probably an amazing guide.
He was amazing.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jessica. I'm sorry for your loss. So you feel that void for advisors, guides, wisdom being injected in instead of you always giving it out.
Yeah. And, I sought it for a lot of time before I did this in like the personal development space. That was my focus for a while. Like right when I left network news, I did a lot of personal development work, which California listeners will get and the rest of the country can Google it. Am I overstating it? Maybe the West Coast gets it. I don't know. And then I realized I need to just shift that focus into you can bring that into work too. Finding people who understand both how to think about self and the way you show up in the world, and creating a business that reflects those things you value in how to show up in the world.
That's so true. We need more of that in this world for sure. And in terms of how you get your news, do you have some secret private Twitter list where you follow a curated, amazing, I don't know, where do you get your news?
I think that, people ask me this all the time. I have developed a skill from being in the business for so long where I am a Hoover vacuum of what's happening without even being aware of how I'm doing it. So yes, I do have a Twitter feed that's been built up over years that drives me to what I need and want. And what I advise people is, if you're trying to build that, follow individual journalists or voices you respect, and then the people they repost and follow, and let those voices sort of drive your feed. And then make sure that you have some who are, center right, center left, like fact-based, but diverse. And if you're a politics person, bring in culture. If you're a culture person, try some politics. You know what I mean? Mix it up a bit. But I also, we used to do, when I was first covering the Obama campaign, because I covered then Senator Obama in Iowa of November, 2007, before he was on the map. And we would drive around, and we didn't have all the social media we had. So we'd be like on Wi-Fi trying to like Google what's happening and so you learn, we have a signal, like let's pull up 5 news sources, quickly stream through, like what's on Drudge was the thing. So you learn how to like constantly be taking in information whenever the Wi-Fi shows up. And that trained me. Like I'll admit I've meditated some days and I suddenly find myself on Twitter.
Oh, sure. I get that. Totally. Are you kidding me? Yes. I'm like, am I allowed to take a...
In a big news day, I'm literally meditating. The next thing I know, I'm holding the phone and looking at Twitter. So I don't know. I'm in it like this. It's a constant process.
That makes sense. Just to wrap us up here, I want to be mindful of your time. If you were to go to the version of yourself that's sitting in your backyard with the phone flipped around, you're getting ready to record your first IG video in that type of setting, what would you say to her?
Change your outfit and go indoors.
Sorry, lighting's not good. See, it's not even that big of advice. Like you can't even think.
I know. I mean, the honest truth is I went outdoors and I filmed it in front of the trees outdoors. And all my friends who'd been rooting me on and telling me to do this called me up afterwards and they were like, it was amazing, Jess, but it kind of looks like you're in the Colombian jungle. Maybe you can just like do it in your living room next time.
And now you have a beautiful set and background that like people are giving you props on. So, well, I love it. If that's the biggest advice you'd get, I think you're doing pretty well.
The other thing I'd say is what everybody needs to hear, which is you're doing a good job. Just like, it's fine. You're doing a good job. It's fine. Helps more than anything.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom with us. We'll be following. I'm a super fan and excited to just see where you take this.
You're so kind. Thank you for having me on. This has been really nice.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time, and until then, why not now?